His Own War, the story of Archibald Baxter, retold by Heidi and Katie.
A different perspective. When the First World War erupted in 1914, many New Zealanders saw it as the chance for a great adventure. Some wanted to see the world with their mates. Others were keen to do their bit and defend their country. But there was another much smaller group of men who had an entirely different perspective. They thought that war was wrong and refused to fight under any circumstances.
At first, these men were mostly seen as cowards, but as the war dragged on and soldiers were desperately needed, men who refused to fight were deeply resented and severely punished. Archibald Baxter was one of those men. He fought a war of his own, which required the courage and endurance of a soldier, the soldier he refused to be.
Beginnings. Archie Nicole Leonard Baxter was born at Saddle Hill near Dunedin on 13th of December 1881. He was the second of 8 children in a family that was poor and often hungry. Archie left school at the age of 12. He worked on farms in the district, thinning turnips, milking cows, herding sheep, building fences and shooting rabbits. He went on to run a small farm south of Brenton owned by his mother's family.
Although Archie was a very good boxer and marksman, he had practical skills that would have made him a great soldier. Something happened in 1900 that was going to change his life. When he was 19, Archie heard the local MP and lawyer Alfred Barclay speaking against war. The speech influenced Archie a great deal, and he went on to read all that he could about pacifism. He decided that war was wrong and that it was wrong to kill, no matter what the circumstances.
Military conscription. The First World War lasted from 4th of August 1914 to 11th of November 1918. In the first week alone, around 14,000 New Zealand men were volunteered, and by the end of the first year of war, there were over 23,000 men in uniform. But the reality of war soon leaked home, and healthy men able and willing to fight were becoming harder to find. In August 1916, the government introduced military conscription. All able-bodied men between the ages of 20 and 45 were considered eligible soldiers. Men randomly chosen each month were required by law to join the army.
Most of the men who were conscripted but obeyed the orders, but a small number appealed on groups of conscience. This meant that for religious, political, or personal reasons, they refused to fight. These men were known as conscience objectors.
Defense and punishment. In 1916, at the age of 35, Archie was called up for military service, but he refused to be conscripted because of his beliefs. After an appeal that was denied, Archie was transported to Trentham military camp near Wellington, where he refused to wear a uniform, salute officers, or obey commands. He was court-martialed and sentenced to 84 days in prison, where he spent much of the time in solitary confinement on a bread and water diet. Back at Trentham, Archie again refused to wear a uniform, so he spent more time in solitary confinement.
One morning in July 1917, Archie was ordered from his bed along with his brothers Jack and Sandy and 11 other conscience objectors. Archie was frog-marched to the Wellington Wharf and onto the troop ship Waitemata. The dentists were confined to small cabins under armed guard and kept apart from the other soldiers. Many years before the war of 1914 to 1918, I had reached the point of view that all war was wrong, failure and destructive, alike to victor and unvanquished.
At Sling Army Camp in England, the cycle of defiance and punishment continued. In February 1918, Archie was sent to the New Zealand Army's base camp in France. Here, he was sentenced to field punishment number 1, which involved being tied to a pole by his hands and feet and left outside for long periods of time. Unable to break his spirit, the authorities sent Archie to a punishment camp, Mud Farm, where he was tied up again. In his memorial, we will not.
Archie wrote of the military policeman who secured him that he knew how to pull and strain the ropes until they cut into flesh and stopped the circulation. When I was taken off, my hands were always black with congested blood.
With his feet unable to touch the ground, which was against army rules, Archie experienced exaggerating pain, but he held off groaning in case the guards heard him. The mental effect, he wrote, was almost as frightful as the physical. I felt I was going mad. Very slowly, however, Archie found inner reserves of strength. He knew he would never surrender, even when he was tied to the pole in the snow and his entire body was numb.
The commander of New Zealand forces in France could see that in Archie's case, field punishment was failing. He decided to send Archie to the front line with Otago Regiment, still refusing to acknowledge he was even in the army. Archie was forced to walk to the front line. He received beatings from military policemen and army officers. One day he was tied up near an amputation dump. Shells fell all around, but Archie survived.
Final defence. Over the next month, Archie would be carried over or forced to walk with his regiment and would receive more beatings. Order was given that he was not to be fed. He lived off whatever scraps he could find. He fell behind the other men and they began to believe that he might not make it. One day Archie lay down, totally exhausted. He fell asleep, and when he woke he was alone and starving. He wandered about aimlessly, falling into ditches and shell holes full of water. He collapsed again, lost conscience, and eventually found by a group of British soldiers, crouched in a field in his underclothes, fearing death. In a final act of defence, Archie had taken off his uniform. Archie was carried to an aid station where he was dressed and fed. He weighed just 44 kilograms, 25 kilograms less than normal, and was a skeleton-like figure of skin and bone. On the 1st of April 1918, he was sent to hospital in France for victims of shell shock.
Day by day, with rest and food, Archie slowly regained his health, although his voice remained hollow whisper and he sometimes trembled uncontrollably. The doctor diagnosed mental weakness and confusional instantly. Because Archie refused to bear arms, and a medical board confirmed in the insane verdict, he began to believe that he might not make it. At the time, the New Zealand Army court-martialed soldiers for deterioration, which was punishable by execution. But insane men could not be court-martialed. And most importantly for Archie, insane men couldn't fight. And so Archibald Baxter had won his own war. Of the 14 objectors who had been sent to France, just two, Baxter and Mark Briggs, had not given and joined the army.
Home. Archie was sent home on the troop ship Maranema, which berthed in Wellington in September 1918. He faced a grilling from the Minister of Defence, who refused to believe he had been subjected to field punishment number 1. Archie was returned to farm work in Otago, although some farmers refused to employ him because of his history. He was 39 years old when he married Millicent Brown in Dunedin. They had 2 sons, Terence, who was imprisoned as a conscience addictor during the Second World War, and James, who became one of New Zealand's best-known poets.